Lynette Rudman, and I'm coming to you live from Grahamstown, South Africa. This is the last of our series of women birders for March month, which is Women's Month. This webinar will be recorded and it will be posted on our Learn the Birds YouTube channel in a few days' time. And if you have any questions and answers or interesting comments, please post them in the comment section below, and Krista will respond to them after her presentation. Now, just a bit of a background about around Krista. I met her when she was here in South Africa, but her home country is Canada. And she received her BSc Honours degree in tree swallows at the Dalhousie University in Canada. After that, she did an internship with the Smithsonian Migratory Bird Center in Washington, DC. After that, she came to Port Elizabeth in South Africa, where she studied for a master's degree, and her study was Cape rock jumpers. And she spent many months and I think a few years in the beautiful mountainous fynbos regions of the Western Cape and the Eastern Cape. And she has fallen in love with that. I've heard her say she yearns for those days to get back to the fynbos. Then her supervisor moved to Rhodes University here in Grahamstown, where I live. And that's where I met Krista, and we did some birding trips together. She completed her PhD, as I said, in Cape rock jumpers, and then she moved back home to Canada. She's now currently doing postgraduate studies in the Negev desert in Israel on Arabian Babblers, and I can't wait to hear more about them. Just a quick background about them. They were one of the first birds to be studied for their social cooperative breeding methods. Several people have studied these birds and their handicap principle. Is it worth helping at someone else's nest? Is it worth staying with your group? Or is it better to disperse alone to greener pastures? And bearing in mind, this is a very dry, arid desert area. And we would like to hear more about these amazing birds from you, Krista. So over to you.
Sure, just let me share my screen here. Thanks, Lynette. Is that working? Yes, I think so. Okay. So some of this will be sort of just expanding on what Lynette just said at the beginning, as I give you just a brief overview and try to squeeze 60 years of research into maybe the first 10 or 15 minutes. So I've been in Israel now for just over a year, about, I guess, 14 months now. And when I first started looking into this project, I'd never heard of the Arabian Babblers, which is a bit embarrassing now that I think about it, but I probably fell in love with them about within a few days. I think watching them work together and play together and interact as a group, it's pretty much impossible not to love these birds, in my opinion. So for a brief history, the Arabian Babbler is, I think without doubt, I tried to look this up and I'm pretty sure it is definitely the first group living, cooperatively breeding bird that has been studied. So when I arrived in Israel, one of the first things we focused on was getting me out to the Arava Valley, which is where the babblers had been intensively studied since the 1960s. This is for sure the longest long-term continuous bird study, and it was started by Amat Zahavi, like I said, in the 1960s. The babblers there are fully habituated, which has allowed researchers to study their behavior in relation to their age, sex, social standing, and family history. And we've really been able to ask some very, very unprecedented and amazing questions over the past few decades. So in Israel, Arabian babblers are found mostly in the southern deserts, but they are also found throughout other parts of the Arabian Peninsula and in the Sinai Peninsula. In more natural areas, they tend to have territories within the wadis, which is the Arab word for an ephemeral valley riverbed. This photo on the right is an example of a typical wadi in the area. It has a lot of shrubs and the occasional acacia tree. So the main study area for the babblers in Israel was in, as I said, the Arava Valley, and it includes the Shezaf Nature Reserve and a few small settlements and agricultural fields. Well, the settlements and agriculture have been expanding in recent years. The nature reserves are still a wonderful and mostly natural study system for asking these interesting questions that can only be answered with long-term data and habituated birds. So these questions might include dispersal, like the why, when, how, and does it actually work? Breeding success over generations, where we're actually finding that similar to what they found in cheetahs, there might be a few super moms that sort of just supply babblers for the entire region. And whether or not more recently settlements are presenting ecological traps or sinks for these birds. Now, these questions are still being examined in all of their different facets as researchers try to find ways to take advantage of this incredible long-term system. Groups of Arabian babblers can be anywhere from just a pair of birds to over 24, which is a sight to see, I have to say, but most groups tend to be around 7 to 10 individuals. Now, for those of you in South Africa, you may be familiar with the habituation and studies of the southern pied babblers in the Kalahari, and you may find it interesting to know that this actually has a very close relationship with the Arabian babblers. Professor Amanda Ridley, who started the habituation and study in the pied babblers, actually studied the Arabian babblers in the Arava for her PhD. So these two used to be in the same genus, but in 2019, the Arabian babbler and a few other babbler species were reassigned after genetic analyses. They are still in the same family, though, and they definitely seem to use a lot of the same techniques as far as how the groups work, how the ranks work, and just how their dispersal and behaviors work. So the Arabian babbler is a desert specialist for sure. And one of the main theories for sociality is that in general, cooperation is helpful in a harsh environment. These bonds need to be reinforced often, and similar to what we see in other animals like chimpanzees or even with whales, a lot of this is playing and grooming and that sort of thing. So I'm going to show you a short video clip of what they call their morning dance, although I think it should be called the morning cuddle personally. And they do this pretty much every day or two, I would say, to reinforce social bonds. And it's obviously adorable, but you can also see that it just is a really, really good bonding experience. They all try to get into the middle and be close with one another, and they just all kind of reinforce all of that bonds that they have. So why cooperate? This is obviously the big question when cooperating generally comes at a cost to individual fitness. Well, the more obvious reason could be just increasing your group size, which will allow you to have better territory and access to better resources. But they also have found that the larger group sizes actually tend to have greater longevity, not just for young and better nesting success, but the adults themselves tend to live longer in a group. So why that is, we're not exactly sure. It could have to do with lowered stress or just shared, just the ability to have these higher quality resources. But lastly, of course, since each group needs only a single sentinel or lookout, it means individual birds can spend more time on important activities like foraging, preening, playing, bonding, and even the occasional fighting. When a predator is spotted, it also means your group is more likely to be able to drive it away. So here I'm going to show you a video of the mobbing behavior of babblers when confronted with a plaster cast of a smooth scale viper, which is a common predator in the Arava.
These are my son, and both groups are here. Look how many babblers.
So you can hear Oded Kenan, who runs the Arava site.
Wow.
This is
crazy.
the little plaster snake.
I never saw something like that. The snake is probably, they wanted to meet and fight.
And now they're distracted.
And the snake is attracting everyone. And because they are all partly brothers and sisters,
They're not too bothered.
Sorry. So I do have to cut that off. We talked about it for quite a while. But as you might have heard Oded say, this is actually two groups of babblers that had been in the middle of a territory squabble. And when we put the little snake plaster cast out, they actually immediately seemed to put aside their differences to make sure that this predator was seen and hopefully was seen out the door. So I'm going to briefly focus specifically on the handicap principle, which Lynette mentioned, which was developed by Imatz and Avishag Zahavi. Physically, the main example of this principle is the male peafowl, whose tail puts him at massively increased risk of predation, and in doing so is a good indicator that he is a worthy mate for the picky peahen. However, they first developed the idea after watching the babblers and wondering why they simply don't lie to one another when it would benefit themselves. The large groups of babblers have only a single breeding pair in well-established groups. And while the group will often include offspring from previous years, it will also include a fair number of unrelated individuals. In particular, they wondered why the non-related individuals also helped feed the offspring, keep a lookout, and seemingly have no benefit to themselves other than maybe the ability to breed in the future. So that's basically it when it comes to the handicap principle with them. Is the idea is you help raise the offspring of the dominant pair with the hope that one day when one of them dies, you can move up the ranks and become the new dominant. To this extent, the hierarchies are usually differentiated by sexes. Male have their own and females have their own. And within related individuals, fighting for your place in the hierarchy is usually established when they're young, and often the ranking then does not change throughout their time together in the same group. So when do these birds disperse then? Well, obviously, if you want to avoid inbreeding, there needs to be the inclusion of new blood into a group. And this often happens when a subordinate is no longer happy with its lot in life and place in a group and makes a power play. Now, in this case, it either loses, in which case it will most often leave the group and try somewhere else, or it wins and the somewhat put out new subordinate will leave and try to find a new group. Now, this is the gist of what we knew about babblers and their social system. And however, as with all things, it's often more complicated. Allegiances shift, a dominant dies, and the entire study system can be thrown into its own War of the Roses. A fed-up bird can try different groups that don't work out and return to its home group with its head held low, and sneaky birds can breed and drop an egg in nests when they don't think the dominant individuals are watching. Honestly, after my last year here, I feel like Game of Thrones wishes it had the level of drama that I have seen. And specifically, we've been able to see this because we've recently begun tracking birds where we can see what they're doing in real time using what's called the Atlas system. So this basically means, and I've sped this up, but we've been putting tags on babblers in this area that let us know where they are every 8 seconds. Now, this is similar to GPS, except it's called reverse GPS because instead of the tag itself taking in the data of where it is and triangulating and fixing its location, which requires the GPS tag usually to be retrieved, these ones actually give off a video, or not a video, a radio frequency ping every 8 seconds that is picked up by antennas we've placed around the study site. And those actually do the triangulation and send it to a computer, which means the tags can be much smaller, much lighter, and last a really long time. And they also don't have to be retrieved, which is really good when it comes to things like this. So our study area is shown here on this map. And it's hard to tell, but topographically, this actually begins being hills. And here we actually have a cliff edge. And so this is what we call the Stetson Plateau. And it's a lovely flat area, which is necessary for an atlas system. And we've actually at the moment got 7 antennas spread out over this area so that we can cover the entire thing, which is about 25 square kilometers and has at the moment, it's shifted a lot recently, but in around 10 groups of babblers that use it regularly. Now, this is the kibbutz Sde Boker. So this is very, very different than the Arava site. And initially, my main research questions had to do with the effects of living in and around this human modified habitat and how it changes their behavior and group dynamics. The plateau around Sde Boker no longer has the natural habitat that we would associate with babblers, but instead has a mosaic of habitats with differing levels of human disturbance and development. We have what we call our high disturbance areas, like in the settlements, and you can be walking around through the villages and the babblers will be hopping around on the trees and the fences and people's gardens, just going about their thing, enjoying the plentiful resources in the Midrashah. But of course, this also means that they're dealing with a lot more human presence, but also invasive species that can lead to increased competition and predation. For example, we now have common mynas here and hooded crows, which historically would not have been in the desert, and a large number of outdoor cats and feral cats, which the babblers also are not very happy about. Our medium human disturbance is the orchards in the area. Again, this is different than the Arava because when they're looking at differences in habitat, they have agriculture that is mangoes and date palms and quite heavily uses pesticides. But the orchards that we have here actually don't use any pesticides. And so they actually do have a lot of resources for the babblers. So a lot of the groups tend to hang out in the olive groves, and there's one argan grove that they also go to, and then the occasional sort of cabbage field that has a lot of food for them. And then we have our low human disturbance areas, which I generally just refer to as the plateau because it's everything else. And this is our closest to a wild habitat that we have. It doesn't have a lot of native vegetation, but it does have a lot of trees and shrubs that the babblers use. And it also, unfortunately, has a lot of picnic sites that are filled with their own human disturbance. So we unfortunately don't have anything here, like I said, that's fully natural, but we do have a very, very interesting mosaic of human disturbance that goes from high to low. So starting in July last year, we began trapping and putting tags on individual babblers. The catching was extremely easy at first, using traditional baited flat traps like I used to catch the rock jumpers in South Africa. For babbler groups that have never seen these, it's very, very easy to just go out and catch all of them at the same time if you wanted to, even just with 4 traps, because they haven't had a chance to learn. But unfortunately, as a social learning, somewhat intelligent bird, they do learn and they teach each other, and it gets harder and harder. And there's very, very swift diminishing returns using these traps, I found, where by about the 4th time I show up with them, no bird will even think about going for them. And the 3rd time, one might think about going for them and another one will alarm call and tell them, nope, that is definitely a trap. So that's been something that we're working on, but it's also the reason that I think after this month, we're probably going to stop trapping them. We've definitely gotten a lot of data from these guys that I really appreciate, but I think now it's probably going to be time to let them just go back to not being trapped and tracked. So just to show you, so this is an example of the tag. It weighs just under 3 grams, anywhere between 2.2 and 2.6 grams, which is about 3% of their body mass. They're not heavily flying birds, very similar to babblers in the rest of the world. They just sort of do gliding flights, but they don't really do sustained flapping flights. So we don't have to be quite as careful as you would with a fully flying bird, but we're still trying to keep it below 3% as much as possible. The whole process now takes probably under 5 minutes from when I catch one to when I deploy one. And you can see here, this is a bird that's just been given a tag, and they seem, you know, they move all right. And the first few tags that I put out, I watched them, and it took probably 5 to 10 minutes before I saw them acting like normal and foraging with the rest of the group. But really, I want to tell you a couple stories of some of the more interesting things that we've been able to find out with these tags that I think otherwise there would be absolutely no way that we'd know these, because the movements that I've seen have happened on a almost daily basis, where the amount of manpower and fieldwork and observations you'd have to do, you would just never be able to pick up some of these movements. So for example, I'm going to talk first about female tag 65. She is unfortunately from the territory I named the Sewage territory. I wasn't thinking about the fact that I would have to present on some of these when I named them. And I named it because I thought that these were sewage treatment. They're actually just water treatment. So I probably could have given them a much nicer name, but unfortunately it has stuck. So she is the Sewage female 65. And I trapped her, I think, right here. And what her movements just astounded me over the next little while. So she was initially trapped here in a group of 3 with a male that had been trapped here. And you can see he had no tail when we caught him. So he'd probably had a close encounter or a fight with someone, but it only takes about 6 weeks for their tail to grow back, luckily. So he'd been trapped here and he moved here, and the 3 of them, these 2 and another male, seemed to be in a trio together. But then suddenly during this breeding season, I started noticing she just started moving around and trying out different groups. So first she moved over to this group, the tower group, and she was with them for a few days. And then she disappeared off the edge of the study site into the cliff. And I thought that was the last I'd see of that tag and she'd be gone. But I think about 3 weeks later, she suddenly popped up again here with the Memorial Park group in the Midrashah. And that really surprised me. I didn't know where she'd been or where she came from or what she was doing. I got on my bicycle and went out to see, and she was not with the males that she'd been with before. And she was sort of trying to see if she'd fit in with the group there. Things obviously didn't work out, and she actually moved on to the university campus group and tried out with them. And then for the next 2 weeks, she sort of bounced between these groups and just didn't seem to find what she was looking for. And then she went over here and joined this group, actually just, I think, last week, before finally, sorry. And at the same time, the male actually ended up ending over here with a different group. And then he ended up back over here with the university group, but not at the same time as this female. And then she disappeared off the cliff again, and I haven't seen her tag in a few days. And this, when we looked into it, was just the most amazing thing we'd ever seen, because as much as we know that birds disperse, we sort of assume it's like they make a move and they try for a group and they probably stay there for a while. And, maybe in a year or two, if they haven't managed to move up the ranks or be in the rank that they want, they might move on. But in general, we think of it more as a fairly long-term sort of process, like they might disperse once or twice in their lifetime. But this reminded me more of, a young person looking for their first job and having probationary periods at different jobs that just didn't work out, where they go here for 3 months and it doesn't work out, and then they go there for 3 months. But in her case, it was on the scale of days or a week, where she'd go hang out with another group, obviously not like her position there, or maybe the personalities didn't get along and those birds didn't really like her, and then she'd go try somewhere else. These tags actually do last upwards of 3 months. So at this point, she's probably got another month and a half to show up in the system again. And I honestly have no idea where she's going to try for next or where she'll end up. We are in the thick of breeding season, so all of their hormones and everything are quite heightened. And she, I assume, is quite desperate to try to breed. So will do whatever she can. But I just can't wait to see where she pops up into the system next, really. And the next story that I'm going to talk about is what I have sort of termed the Great Shift of 2023. So this happened in January and took a lot of trips of me going to the field to try to figure out what was going on, because unfortunately, what I've tried to do so far is have one active tag per group at any point in time. So with tags lasting 3 months, After 2 months, I'll go to a group and try to tag another bird to make sure, just in case there's battery failure, that there's an overlap, just so I can see the general territory shifting. But this became quite difficult when often it seemed like the birds I'd tagged moved groups. Now, it's impossible at this point to tell whether or not I was just catching sort of bolder, more aggressive and likely to disperse birds, or if the birds are just doing this way more often than we assumed, and this is proportional to how much they just try out different groups. But what happened in 2023, and I'm going to focus on these 4 groups that I've circled here, is basically, and it took me a little while to figure this out, but what I think must have happened is this dominant female died. I haven't seen her since. I don't know what happened. She didn't have a tag, so I'm not sure if she disappeared or went somewhere else, but I assume that she probably died, because what I've been told from the Arava is that a dominant female would never just leave a group that she was dominant in. So this threw the power dynamics of this system into absolute turmoil, and it just became a power struggle, because I'm pretty sure this territory is quite high value. They had the best breeding success last year. They had 4 successful nests. So it's obviously a really, really good territory. So what I saw was a female from here moved in there. And that seemed like it made sense. She was probably, you know, 2nd or 3rd down the ranks in that group and thought, this is my time, I'm going to move over here. But she seemed to bring some of her group with her, not all of them, but just some of them. And then at the same time, one of the probably subordinate males from this group moved over here, but he also brought a bunch of birds with him. So this group used to be about 21 birds, and it was our largest group for sure. And so now there's actually only 8 of them. And it seems like that dominant female dying, just the entire group split up. I don't know where some of them are. I haven't managed to recite them, but only some of them stayed. This female brought some with her, and this male left and brought some with him. Now, at the same time, this male obviously decided this was going to be a good chance, because now there was no real obvious dominant birds in here other than maybe this female. And so he also moved in there. And then I actually had a female from over here also move here. So this group now had birds that had been in 4 different territories 2 months before. And basically what this means is that this breeding season, I have so many groups that are currently in flux as far as who will be dominant. And this is most obviously seen by the fact that the nests that are being built this year have more eggs than one female would lay. So a female that's dominant in a well-established territory will lay 4, maximum 5 eggs. And a lot of nests this year are showing up with 8 eggs or more, which basically means 2 or possibly 3 females are vying for dominance and all laying eggs in the same nest. And I'm not sure how many males are also vying for dominance, because that's a little bit harder to tell. But it is just chaos out there this year. And I found it even more sort of, I don't know, sad, but also amazing that it seems like in the entire process, the children were not sure which parents or group to go with. So this is a juvenile that was born last year. I don't know if he's male or female. So I don't know if it's male or female. So I'm using an androgynous symbol at the moment. But so he was in this group for a week and then moved over to this group for a week. Well, at the same time, this female left, and she has also now been roaming the plateau. And then now he's moved back, but for a while, he probably every 5 days was switching which group that he was hanging out in between these 2. So it just really seems like all of this preconceived notion I had that these groups were at least somewhat stable, just seems like it's absolutely going out the window over here. Now, the image we have of this could be, you know, a bit of a subterfuge on the part of the babblers who have been busy keeping up the pretense of a stable family unit. But it could actually also go back to that original question I had of whether or not the social dynamics are being just flipped around and switched up in this different habitat. So in the Arava, when they're in those wadis, in general, they only come up against two different territories, one on either end of sort of the territory that they have, which tends to be just like a straight line. But if you'll look here, the territories all overlap here. This is the kibbutz, which is just the next settlement over, and it's been here for quite some time. And I refer to it as sort of the five corners of New York, where I'm actually, because they weren't involved, I'm not showing them, but there's another group here and another group here, and they all overlap and constantly come into contact with each other. And it just makes us wonder whether or not that constant contact means that they're building all of these secret alliances and friendships and you know, could be enemies as well with different groups. And if they're just able to communicate and think about dispersal in a way that they wouldn't be able to do in places where they're only coming into contact with one or two other groups that likely still have related individuals, because if you're going to disperse, you're going to disperse to the next group over first and see if that's a good fit. So really, this is also sort of a motivation in a way for tracking, because a lot of this we just would never be able to figure out without the tracking tags. The birds that I mentioned moving between those groups here, this bird had a tag, this bird had a tag, this one had a tag, and this one had a tag. And if that wasn't the case, I never would have known that this bird was going back and forth between these groups. So it makes me wonder as well, how much of this is just that realistically, without tracking tags, spotting a single bird on its own would be difficult and would be very easy to overlook. So as I said, I've either been quite lucky in that the birds with tags are those more likely to roam, or they just actually roam more often than we knew. And this is just something that we're being able to see and dig out of this system from having these tracking tags. So yeah, I guess this presentation is sort of equal parts how fascinating Arabian Babblers are, but also sort of a motivation for the amazing things that we can learn with modern technology like tracking. So I guess I'm probably going to finish a bit early, but I hope that means I have a lot of time for questions. But I always like to finish with something cute. So I've been trying to relate all of these movements and habitat use and territory use and the mosaic of different habitats and predators and invasive bird species and things, trying to relate all of that back to what really matters, which is their breeding success. So we are currently deep in the very elongated breeding season that is the babbler breeding season. It's actually even more sporadic in the Arava, where it depends mostly just on resource availability. But here we are actually in the Negev highlands, so it's a little bit colder. And that means that I for sure tend to get at least a few months off of breeding season because it's too cold at night. But here they will start to build their first nests probably mid-January and could have them as late as into July. They will continually breed, whether or not they have a successful nest. As I said, that one group last year, she had 4 successful nests in a row. And I've seen some have 5 nests where one was successful and they kept having a few more. Building at least 3 nests seems to be fairly common. And last year I did have a few groups that had 2 successful nests. So to show you, this is actually an example here of a territory that has 2 females fighting for dominance. This actually was just 3 days ago, the nest hatched. There are now 7 nestlings and 1 egg that has not hatched yet. It still could, but it's quite unlikely. And I'm very curious to see what happens here. They're in a very resource heavy area where they shouldn't have any issues with food, but their nests are not built to be big enough to fit 7 babies. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens. And I know in the Arava, they tend to not be able to successfully fledge more than probably 5 babies because they just really don't fit very well. And this is actually this morning. I went to a nest that had 10-day-old nestlings, so they were now ready for their rings. And this is also footage from this morning, and these are 13 old nestlings that I ringed 3 days ago. And I just want to show you, I do have motion detected cameras on every nest that I find, so I can monitor the exact phenology of egg laying and fledging and potential predation. But they just become huge, demanding monsters when they're 13 days old. And this is probably my favorite stage of nestlings, is when they start to get ready to fledge. So these guys will probably leave the nest in another 2 days, although tomorrow they might start walking around the nest and sort of practicing fledging. Yeah, but that's really, I guess, all I had to say about them. So I would definitely like to acknowledge my principal investigators, and especially my technician here, Tamir, who I think was definitely not into birds at all, but has become quite a fan and is just almost as obsessed with us having a good study system as I am. Also my 2 lab groups, but especially Oded Kainan and the Arabian Babblers research group in the Arava. They have put up with so many questions from me on how to do all of this and what is normal and what's not normal. And I just wanted to show you this photo of an Arabian Babbler. This one actually has one of our tags on it. And as you can see, after maybe a week, it just looks like they have a little hump. So I was happy to see that their feathers cover it very, very well. And I think, yeah, you can maybe see the antenna that sort of sticks out the back, but it's actually surprisingly unobtrusive. And I would be happy to take any questions.
Sorry, I think I blocked Lynette from turning on her microphone. Just one sec. Okay, Lynette, you should be able to turn on your microphone now. Apologies for that. Lynette, are you there?
I'm unmuted, but my video is still off. I'll have to do this just by sound.
Okay, I've made you co-host, so you should be able to turn on your video as well.
Oh, there it is. There it is. Okay.
Sorry about that. There were some videos and audios that came on during the talk, so I just blocked everyone.
Oh, that's fine. There are a few questions. Let's get to the first one. Ayesha said, how do you differentiate between male and female?
Good question. I should have mentioned that. They very handily have different eye colors. Yeah, other than that, they're exactly the same, but this is actually a female, and you can see she has an all black shark eye kind of looking thing. But if I go back, that's a juvenile. So his is kind of halfway, which again, they sort of either go dark or go light, but this is a male, and you can see he has a yellow iris.
Oh, that's interesting. David asks, if all those eggs hatch, wouldn't it be good for the overall growth of the population? Or will some of the chicks be killed by the dominant parent?
Well, like in a nest of 8, I assume, like I showed.
Yeah.
The thing is, in that there isn't a dominant pair. In those cases, there's 2. Probably 2 dominant, well, 2 fighting for dominant females, and they'll lay their eggs at the same time, so they don't actually know which ones are theirs. But I did actually just recently, and I'm not sure yet, well, I have a hypothesis for why it happened, but I had 2 females fighting. They laid 8 eggs in a nest, and then when it was about ready to hatch, I'd noticed that only 1 female had been incubating, and when it was probably the day I thought it would hatch, she abandoned the nest and started building another one. And what I think happened is she won dominance and wanted to build a nest where she knew all the eggs were hers. So in a nest of 8 eggs, I just don't think they always can raise 7, but I am interested to see if these ones can, because food wise, they should be able to. But if you saw, I mean, the video I showed only has 3 in the nest, and imagine 7 this size.
Wow.
They'd push each other out accidentally just in going crazy and trying to, be the one that gets the next meal. So I'm just not sure whether or not they'll be able to make it, but luckily I have a camera on it, so we'll be able to find out.
And the next question, which individuals of a group are sitting on the eggs and incubating them? Males, females, dominant, subs?
It is mostly the dominant pair. There are cases where some of the others will occasionally incubate, but it is mostly the dominant pair, and the dominant female is always the one that sleeps on the nest overnight. So that's also been kind of interesting, because when they're fighting for dominance, they also fight to see who gets to incubate on the nest at night. And they, like, in a nest with a stable group, they lie down and they incubate, and they probably stay for 2 or 3 hours before someone comes and subs them out. But in a nest where they're fighting for dominance, every 10 minutes, the one will come and flush the other one off and try to take her turn. So I'm not sure as well what that does to just the development of the eggs. I imagine, and actually I should check with this nest. I imagine it takes a day or 2 longer for them to hatch, because they're not getting the constant warmth, because there's constantly this shift of adult on top of them.
Oh, that's interesting. The next question, what was the yardstick to decide a certain bird has moved to a new group, since you mentioned some birds intermingle?
Like, how did I define a group, I think is what they mean.
I think so. The bird that moved to the new group, was
Yeah.
it accepted as the dominant male or female?
The only time I've seen that for sure is this female that moved from here. She is for sure the dominant female there. This group is one that has 2 females and 2 males fighting for dominance. So is this group, actually. It has 2 females, but they have actually for about the last 2 years been fighting for dominance. I think they must be sisters. I'm not sure, because it's weird for them to put up with that for so long without one winning out. But we'll see. So this is the only case where I've seen a clear shift, and that's because this dominant was gone.
Oh, fascinating. Wow.
But I should say how I determined which group they were in is who they were roosting with. So if they roosted with a group one night and the next night, I considered that day between as them being with that group.
Yeah, very interesting. Are there any more questions before we wrap up? Doesn't look like there are any more. Thanks so much, Krista. That was so interesting. I've learned so much about these Arabian Babblers. Wow, really incredible. When you're coming back to the Fynbos?
Next time there's a conference so that someone can pay me to come back. But either that, or hopefully, I know we definitely want to at least go visit South Africa within the next probably 5 years. I think we're gonna try to have to make a trip out there for sure. So gotta go see my rock jumpers.
Yeah.
But thank you for having me.
Yeah, David, I don't seem to be able to find your question about the wrens in the US. Can you maybe retype it quickly?
Wrens in the US.
I don't see it. I don't see anything about wrens in the US.
Oh, I see similarities to wren species in the US in their anatomy and tail elevation. No, I think though there must be a convergent evolution thing happening with them, and I would say thrashers. To me, they remind me a lot of the American thrashers, as far as I think they look a lot like them. But the tail up thing is definitely, I guess, more of a wren feature. But no, I don't know why some birds do that. To me, I think these ones do it because when you keep your tail down, it tends to get ratty and short. Like I'm sure we've all seen mynas and crows and things like that. And they don't want to damage their long tails. Their Hebrew name actually means the bird with the long tail. So it's their defining feature, and they don't want to do anything to risk that.
Okay, we've got some more questions. Do they literally fight for dominance, or how do they do it?
They do. They play when they're juveniles, which looks, like fighting will look, but not as aggressive. But they do full on fight, and we actually in the Arava they'll get so aggressive they can kill each other. It can get that extreme. It doesn't often, but it is quite aggressive. It's definitely like watching two eagles go at each other, claw first, and they'll rip the color rings off of each other. They're so aggressive sometimes. So yeah, it's a babbler world out there.
Ayesha asks, any suggestions for candidates interested to join your lab? How to join and whom to contact?
I would say, talk to email either Ori or Oded, the principal investigators. They're always looking for new people to come.
Okay. And Jean asks, are there any relation to apostle birds in Australia?
I don't think so. Australian birds aren't really related to, I think in general, most Australian birds aren't related to most birds anywhere else. I think that again is just some convergent evolution of just, again, being in a relatively harsh environment. There's just certain things, and for some birds, going the route of social cooperation seemed to be the best way to handle it.
Mm. Elizabeth asks, what did the local people think of you studying these birds?
The
From
reception's
Canada
actually, the reception's been pretty great from what I can see. I definitely have a lot of people. It's very busy here. I mean, Israel is a very dense country. So even when I'm just out in the field looking for a nest, I tend to see a person or a hiking group or things like that. And I feel bad because I don't speak Hebrew, and they're obviously interested a lot of the time. So we sort of have this half conversation unless I have a Hebrew speaking assistant with me. But right now, this morning I found a nest in someone's shrub, and they were very excited to have the camera because these cameras are very fancy. They have a SIM card, and I can monitor them remotely. So when I put one up, I don't have to do anything at the nest for a month, which is just great. And I know what's happening. And I can actually get a QR code that gives the person a link so they can actually see the footage as well. And that has been just massively popular when they have a nest in their backyard, and I can give them a link so they can actually watch the nest, and they'll show it to their grandkids, and it's very cute and that kind of thing. The tagging, the actual atlas tags, some people were nervous about that, but I've taken quite a few videos showing how they act afterward. And I mean, this guy here, he has a tag, and he's in the memorial park, and occasionally someone will take a photo of him and put it up on Facebook and say, why does this bird have a tag? And then we'll answer the question, and they're like, oh, that's really neat. So in general, it's been very positive.
Oh, that's great. So it's educating the public as well, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Okay, I think there aren't any more questions. Thanks so much, Krista. We really enjoyed that. We hope to have you back again sometime. You're such a brilliant speaker.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. And thanks very much, Krista. And when you do your next adventure, let us know.
I'll have to find a new bird to study so that I have something to talk about. Yeah.
We have to go to the Amazon or something, somewhere different.
Yeah, that'll be next. All right. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks so much. Thanks,
Cheers.
everybody.
Bye-bye. Bye,
Bye.
everybody. Thanks for coming. And don't forget to spread the word.